Every year, billions of litres of water leak out of outdated and damaged pipes into the desert before they're able to reach the kitchens and bathrooms of family homes in Jordan, one of the driest countries in the Middle East. The amount of water that's lost through faulty infrastructure each year is enough to fulfill the requirements of 2.6 million people, more than a third of Jordan's entire population. Bottled water is currently a more expensive resource than oil, and many are predicting that it will continue to overtake it as the most valuable resource in the Middle East. The water shortage is the most significant environmental issue plaguing the region, and it's predicted that by 2025, countries on the Arabian Peninsula will require double the amount of water than what will be available. So what does this mean for a region that's not only predominantly desert, but also prone to outbreaks of both diplomatic and militarized conflict? The term hydropolitics was coined in the late 1970s and describes the systematic study of conflict and cooperation between states over water resources that transcend international borders. Most countries in the Middle East use three major waterways as their primary access to water: the Tigris-Euphrates River, the Jordan River, and the Nile. All these waterways cross at least one international border, with the Nile alone shared by 9 different countries. Cities and countries that are located downstream are significantly impacted by the way that countries further upstream use the waterway, creating a high amount of resentment and little room for negotiation. Let's look at Israel as an example of how strategic resource management can be used to consolidate a regional political advantage. Since its establishment, Israel has invested in educating the population on water conservation, desalination technology, and sewage treatment that can be recycled for agricultural purposes. The result is a surplus of water that's exported to Jordan and the Palestinian territories, disproving predictions by 1930s British economists who estimated that water supplies would only be able to sustain 2 million people in an area that now encompasses 12 million Israelis and Palestinians. Sharing these advanced developments in water technology with over 150 countries has enabled Israel to increase their political standing and overcome elements of their diplomatic and regional isolation. However, water supplies in the Palestinian territories are almost entirely controlled by Israel, despite the Jordan River flowing through the eastern border of the West Bank. The World Health Organization's minimum standard for daily water access per person is 100 litres. However, Israelis have access to 240 litres, while Palestinians in the West Bank only have access to 73. The situation is more severe in the Gaza Strip, where only 10% of the population has access to a clean water source. Not only is water scarcity an issue, but irreparable infrastructure and a lack of sanitation systems have contaminated the water supplies that are available, rendering them undrinkable. When safe drinking water becomes inaccessible, the strain of the rapid deterioration in civilian health can often intensify existing regional conflict. For over 2 years, the ongoing civil war in Yemen has devastated what was already considered the region's poorest country. While both sides of the conflict have contributed to the crisis, the aerial and naval blockade imposed by the Saudi Arabia-led coalition has significantly restricted the flow of humanitarian assistance into the country, bringing Yemen to the brink of famine.
Similar to Syria in a way, that has released a wave of humanitarian sort of crisis in Yemen, a very poor country, and a country that Saudi Arabia, noting unrest in other countries, is extending very strongly into trying to crush Houthi unrest. It sees Yemen as slipping out of its control.
80% of the population, equivalent to almost the whole of Australia, is relying on humanitarian assistance in the form of water, food, and medical aid.
This is also one of the main reasons why relying so much on international aid is not sustainable at all. Because, okay, you can have aid coming into those territories and you can boost consumption, but if you don't boost investments, if you don't create a safe place to invest, and if you don't create possibilities for investments to happen, and therefore for an economy to recover on its own, this creates an unsustainable situation. Especially when aid flows start to decline, and we know that aid flows always depend on political economy conditions.
A lack of access to clean water has caused an unprecedented cholera outbreak, which has spread throughout the entire country and has been described by the UN as the world's worst humanitarian disaster. Eradicated in the First World after the invention of modern sanitation systems and antibiotic treatments, cholera is a bacterial infection that spreads through water contamination. and can result in fatal dehydration if left untreated. Amidst the political collapse of the country, the disease is killing 1 Yemeni every hour, with the number of cases expected to rise. The UN humanitarian coordinator in Yemen recently explained, "What is heartbreaking in Yemen is that humanity is losing out to the politics." Similarly, Amnesty International's Deputy Regional Director of the Middle East and North Africa declared, "The Palestinian authorities in the West Bank, Hamas and Israel must all ensure that their political disputes are not dealt with in a manner that tramples the basic rights of Gazans."
I don't see it as... I can't see that the way the alignment is now as sparking a specific conflict between two specific players. I think it's going to be more general resources strain on these economies and these countries trying to work out how to manage that.
Israel and the Palestinian territories are just one example of how resource management can be used to leverage political control, while the crisis in Yemen demonstrates how quickly conflict can be exacerbated once access to these basic resources is restricted. Water is an invaluable resource that will continue to underpin social, political, and security issues in the Middle East, while the region's access and supplies simultaneously continue to diminish. We have to go to a break, but stick around as International Disaster and Crisis Response Manager Nova Wilkes joins me to further discuss the deteriorating humanitarian crisis in Yemen.